Hey, what's going on YouTube? It's Falsa again, and I'm here with yet another video about the new pet and the new infantry heroes. And it feels like I've done like half a dozen of these videos just in the past week. It kind of feels like that to me as well. And I'm not trying to beat a dead horse here. But here's the deal. By the time you're watching this, I'm going to be on the road traveling. Look, if it feels like I just got back from traveling, it is because I just got back from traveling. But this is kind of how the summer goes for me. You know, the school's out, people are traveling, there's family obligations, and I just spend a lot of time on the road during the summer. Now, look, I'm still going to have access to the game. I'll still have access to Discord. If you send me a message, I will respond to you. It might take me a bit longer than usual, but I'll get back to you as soon as I can. But honestly, like, I can't produce a video when I'm on the road. I just don't have the capabilities. So I figured I've promised a video to a lot of people, and I better get it out before I hit the road. And that's for a budget build for a pet for the two new heroes. All right. Now, like I said, I've done a bunch of videos on these guys already. I'm not going to rehash them. If you have any questions about these heroes, I encourage you to go watch those videos, and I'll leave cards in the end screen. But very briefly, you know, these guys have a role in the rally garrison meta, but if you're in the budget build world, you're usually not looking to rally garrison, you're just looking for open fielding. So that's what we're focused on here, open fielding. And very briefly, these guys, they want to be in extended melee combat with as many enemies as possible when they're open fielding. Okay, so is that the Mossrock? How do we build a Mossrock, you know, to encourage that with on a pretty limited budget? Okay, so the build you see here, this is the pet damage build. This is a very powerful build, but this is not a budget build. I do not encourage you to use this if you're trying to build this pet on a budget. But let's look at one thing very quickly, and that's just the talent skill again. And I just want to point out that I think the Mossrock is actually one of the better pets you could ever build on like the budget build kind of plan. And the reason is the Mossrock actually reminds me a little bit of the Shadow Phaedrake in that half of its skill is about doing damage to the enemy, and the other half of its skill is about enhancing the hero's ability, the Legion's ability to do what it wants to do, right? So the talent skill itself is split between both the hero enhancement or budget build and the pet damage build. And when you see that, that's one of those things you can really take advantage of and build the budget build. Okay, so with that in mind, what are the kind of skills we want in a budget pet and hero enhancement pet? We want to enhance our hero's ability to stay alive in the field in a melee combat against a lot of enemies simultaneously. Okay, the first and most obvious thing I think you want, and we'll just filter here by filter and mix because obviously we don't want any magic skills, is we want all the skills that increase our hero's counterattack abilities. All right, that's blood for blood, that's hit back, and that's swift revenge. All right, so we start with the talent skill, and then we add all three counterattack skills here, right? These will enhance our hero's counterattack when they make those counterattacks in the field, because we expect they're going to be hit by a lot of legions all the time. All right, so that's 4. The next thing I want you to think about is Counterstrike. Now, Counterstrike, you know, you saw it on the other build, the pet damage build, and it does have a role there. But Counterstrike, you know, it does a couple things. It's got a 50% chance to launch an additional Legion counterattack whenever your Legion's hit by a normal attack. The Counterstrike counterattack counts as a Legion attack, but the damage is filtered through, you know, the star level of Counterstrike and the endurance attribute on your pet. Now you might say, hey, like 7,200, that's actually pretty expensive for a budget build, and I agree with you. But here's the thing about Counterstrike. The only difference on the star level of Counterstrike is the damage the Counterstrike does. Even if you get a 0-star Counterstrike, which is not that expensive, it's still going to give you exactly the same number of Counterstrike counterattacks. They're just not going to hit as hard, but they're still going to give you all the, you know, the enhancements, all the synergies that you want from those counterattacks. You know, Laquan and Kuma, they're not exactly Gorish Skogul when it comes to counterattacks, but they do have some good, you know, counterattack synergy. In particular, if you go into Kuma and you build them out, I highly recommend you take the Luck of the Draw talent, which gives you a chance whenever you launch a counterattack to basically get a damage reduction buff up to a maximum of 3% damage reduction. It lasts for 20 seconds. I think this thing is really strong. And the Counterstrike counterattack, the counterattacks that come from that can trigger this as well. So that's a really good synergy. You only need at the 0-star level I think you got to have it on the pet. Okay, so that's 5 skills you have right there. What's the next thing we want to think about here? Okay, now if you watch my other videos, if you've explored these heroes at all, you know that Kuma has a really, really strong ability, which gives him sort of like stacking HP bonus, which he drains from enemies around him. And both Laquan and Kuma also have other abilities that increase their hit points. They want to stay alive for a really long time. So let's think about some skills that will help them do that. Okay, I'm not going to get into too much math here, but here's the thing about Laquan and Kuma. When they're fighting, they're going to get a ton of bonus hit points, all right? Now, hit points is a really great stat, but after a while, it starts to suffer diminishing returns, and you want other thing. When you get a ton of hit points, you want other defensive stats. You don't want to stack more hit points on top of that. That's why I think Terra Barrier and Bristles are excellent additions to the budget build, all right? These things are going to make all those hit points you gain last much, much longer, all right? Bristles gives you attack mitigation, and Terra Barrier gives you additional defense. They're both great, and here's the other thing. They're both endurance skills, and if you look at the Mossrock, its attributes aren't evenly distributed. Now look, every Mossrock is going to have different, different roles, if you will, but the max strength and the max endurance are much higher than everything else, and so those two skills, Terra Barrier and Bristles, being endurance skills, they're great for this pet. Okay, now that gives us the talent skill, the 3 counterattack enhancers for 4, the Counterstrike, Terra Barrier, and Bristles. That's 7 skills for this pet. All right. In the budget build world, you don't need to always be rolling for an 8-slot pet with perfect stats. You can certainly go with a lesser number there. But if you do have that 8 slot, what do you want in that 8 slot? Additional hit points kind of run into diminishing returns here, but like it's still better than nothing. Robust body is a choice there. If you want to move a little faster, I don't hate wild agility. Agility is a good stat for you. And if you have a good strength score, there's not a lot of other things you want here. Shield Breaker can be okay, although you're not really trying to penetrate defense all that much. Kind of the same thing with agility. That's not really Kuma's bag. It is pretty good for Laquan though, so not the best, but it's okay. That's the budget build. Now I have this pet right here, and this is how I've built out my budget Mossrock. And basically what happened here is I got this, and the Swift Revenge was already on there with a 1-star, and it had a 0-star talent on there, and I was rolling to try and get it down to 2 skill slots, and then I rolled this, and I'm like, I might as well keep this and build out the hero enhancement budget build on this, just to have it in my inventory so I can use it and be able to show it to people. So this is the skills that I recommend on here, and obviously the 8th slot, that's a bit of a wild card. You can go over one of the skills that I've talked about before. All right, so this is not going to be as effective as the power build here. Let's just say we built all these skills out to 2 stars, except for obviously the amber skills here, which will always be 3 stars. And then we'll compare the cost of this pet to the budget build. Here's the difference. All right, that's all I got for you today. Like I said, by the time you're watching this, if you watch it anywhere near release, I'll be on the road. I'll still have the ability to respond to messages. I'll still have access to the game. So if you send me something, I will try and get back to you as quickly as I can. But otherwise, that's all I got. And until next time, you stay classy, Belleron.